The prairie wind howled through the darkness like a wounded animal, carrying with it the scent of coming rain and distant campfire smoke. Sarah Mitchell pressed herself against the rough bark of a cottonwood tree, her breath coming in sharp, painful gasps that tore at her bruised ribs. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, metallic and warm against her split lip. Behind her, somewhere in the vast Montana wilderness, her husband was searching. She could hear his voice cutting through the night, calling her name with a tone that promised violence wrapped in false sweetness. She had been running for 3 hours now, barefoot across rocky ground that shredded the soles of her feet with every desperate step. Her dress, once pristine white cotton that marked her as a proper frontier wife, hung in tatters around her shoulders. The fabric was stained with blood, dirt, and the evidence of 5 years of suffering. 5 years of believing his promises would come true, that he would change, that the man she married still existed somewhere beneath the monster he had become. The settlement of Fort Benson lay 2 days behind her now. She had fled during the evening meal, when Thomas had drunk himself into his usual rage. This time, something was different. This time, she had seen murder in his eyes, not just the threat of it, but the cold certainty. He had reached for his rifle, and some primal instinct had sent her running through the back door and into the gathering dusk. Now the moon rose high above the plains, painting the landscape in shades of silver and shadow. Sarah knew she could not keep running forever. Her body was failing, each breath a study in agony, each step slower than the last. Thomas was a tracker, a hunter who had survived 3 winters in these territories before she arrived from Boston with dreams of building a new life. He would find her. It was only a matter of time. A sound froze her in place. Not Thomas's voice this time, but something else. The soft crunch of grass beneath careful footsteps. She pressed harder against the tree, willing herself to become invisible, to disappear into the bark itself. Her heart hammered so violently she thought it might burst from her chest. This was it. He had found her. The end had come. But the figure that emerged from the darkness was not her husband. A man stepped into the moonlight, tall and broad-shouldered, his long black hair falling loose around his face. He wore buckskin leggings and a shirt decorated with intricate beadwork that caught the silver light. His face was strong and weathered, marked by years under the open sky, and his dark eyes assessed her with an intensity that made her shrink back. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Please don't tell him where I am." The man tilted his head, studying her torn dress, her bruised face, her bleeding feet. When he spoke, his English was accented but clear, each word measured and deliberate. "Who hunts you?" "My husband." The confession came with shame that burned in her chest. Good wives did not run from their husbands. Good wives endured. But good wives also did not end up buried in unmarked graves on the frontier, and Sarah had seen that future written clearly in Thomas's eyes tonight. The stranger's expression hardened. In the distance, Thomas's voice rang out again, closer now, slurred with whiskey and rage. The man before her made a decision with the swift certainty of someone accustomed to command. He moved forward, and before Sarah could protest, he swept her into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. "I am Two Hawks," he said quietly. "Chief of the Hunkpapa Lakota. You are under my protection now." He turned and moved through the darkness with the silent grace of smoke, carrying her deeper into the wilderness. Sarah wanted to speak, to thank him, to ask why he would help a white woman he did not know. But exhaustion and pain overwhelmed her, pulling her down into darkness. The last thing she heard before consciousness fled was Thomas's furious screaming fading into the distance, swallowed by the vast and indifferent prairie night. Sarah woke to the smell of sage smoke and the crackling warmth of a fire. For a moment, confusion clouded her thoughts. The ceiling above her was not the rough timber planks of the cabin she had shared with Thomas, but smooth buffalo hide stretched over wooden poles. Intricate paintings decorated the interior, geometric patterns in red and blue and yellow that seemed to move in the flickering firelight. She lay on soft furs that cushioned her battered body, and someone had covered her with a blanket woven in beautiful earth tones. Memory returned in a rushing flood. The escape. The desperate flight through darkness. Two hawks. She sat up too quickly and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through her ribs. A gentle hand pressed against her shoulder, guiding her back down. A woman knelt beside her, elderly but with eyes that held sharp intelligence. She spoke in Lakota, words flowing like water over stones, incomprehensible but somehow soothing. The woman gestured to a clay bowl beside the fire, then mimed drinking. Sarah's throat felt like sandpaper, her tongue thick and swollen. She nodded, and the woman helped her sit up more slowly this time, supporting her back with surprising strength. The liquid in the bowl tasted of herbs and honey, strange but not unpleasant. It eased the burning in her throat and seemed to quiet some of the pain radiating through her body. Outside the lodge, Sarah could hear the sounds of a living community. Children laughing and calling to each other. The low murmur of adult conversation. Dogs barking. Horses nickering. The rhythmic pounding of something being worked with stone tools. This was no temporary camp but her established village, hidden somewhere in the vast wilderness that stretched across the Montana Territory. The hide flap covering the lodge entrance lifted, and two hawks entered. In daylight, or what filtered through the hide walls, Sarah could see him more clearly. He was perhaps 30 years old, with a face that combined strength and thoughtfulness in equal measure. A scar ran along his left jawline, white against his copper skin. He wore his authority like a second skin, evident in the way he moved and the respect shown by the woman, who bowed her head slightly before gathering her medicine supplies and slipping out. Two hawks settled himself across the fire from Sarah, crossing his legs and regarding her with those dark, penetrating eyes. When he spoke, his voice was deep and calm. "You have slept for 2 days. White Dove Woman says your body needed healing time." 2 days. Sarah's mind reeled. Thomas would be searching. He would be furious beyond measure. And she had brought danger to these people who had shown her nothing but kindness. "I should not be here," she said, her voice cracking. "My husband will come looking for me. He will bring others. I have put you all at risk." "Your husband searches in the wrong direction," two hawks replied. "I made certain of this. The tracks I left lead northeast, toward the Canadian territories. He follows them even now, growing more distant with each passing hour." Sarah stared at him, trying to comprehend this level of strategic thinking applied to her desperate situation. "Why would you do this for me? You do not know me. I am white. My people and yours are not friends." Two Hawks was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant, focused on something Sarah could not see. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of old pain. 3 winters passed, my wife was taken by white traders. They wanted her for their pleasure, and when she resisted, they beat her until she could no longer stand. They left her dying in the snow. I found her, brought her home, but she lived only long enough to make me promise something. He paused, feeding another stick into the fire. Sparks rose and danced toward the smoke hole at the lodge's peak. "She made me swear that if I ever found another woman suffering as she had suffered, I would offer protection. She said that pain knows no color, that cruelty wears many faces, and that the strong have a duty to shield the weak. I keep my promises to my wife, even though she walks with the ancestors now." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, hot and unexpected. In 5 years of marriage, Thomas had never spoken to her with such simple humanity. He had owned her, controlled her, used her, but he had never truly seen her. This stranger, this man whose people had every reason to hate her, saw her suffering and chose compassion over indifference. "I am sorry for your loss," she whispered. 2 Hawks nodded acknowledgement. "And I am sorry for yours, though you still live. The woman you were before you ran into the night, she is lost also. But perhaps the woman you will become can be stronger." The days blended into each other, marked by the rhythm of village life and the slow, stubborn healing of Sarah's body. White Dove Woman, whose name Sarah learned through patient gestures and the few English words the elder woman knew, tended her injuries with poultices that drew out infection and reduced swelling. The bruises faded from purple-black to green-yellow. Her ribs, which White Dove Woman determined were cracked but not broken, began to hurt less with each breath. The cuts on her feet scabbed over and slowly knit closed. But the deeper wounds, the ones that could not be seen, remained raw and bleeding. Sarah flinched at sudden movements. Loud voices made her heart race and her hands shake. At night, she woke screaming from dreams where Thomas's hands closed around her throat, his face twisted with rage, his breath hot and rank with whiskey as he promised her a grave in the wilderness where no one would ever find her bones. On these nights, 2 Hawks would appear at the lodge entrance, never entering without invitation, his presence a silent reassurance that she was safe. Sometimes he would sit just outside, visible through the gap in the hide flap, and speak quietly about nothing important. The weather. The hunting parties that had ridden out at dawn. The colt that had been born 3 days ago and still wobbled on uncertain legs. His voice became an anchor, something to focus on besides the terror that clawed at her mind. During the days, Sarah observed village life from the safety of White Dove Woman's lodge. She watched women working hides, their hands moving with practiced efficiency as they scraped and stretched and smoked the leather until it became soft and supple. She saw children learning to ride horses, small bodies clinging to the animals' backs with fearless joy. She witnessed the return of hunting parties, the celebration when they brought back deer or elk, the careful distribution of meat that ensured no one went hungry. It was so different from the settlement life she had known. There, every family hoarded what they had, suspicious of neighbors, protective of their own interests above all else. Here, the community functioned as a single organism, each part supporting the whole. When one family's lodge needed repair, others came to help without being asked. When someone fell ill, the entire village contributed herbs and medicine. Children belonged not just to their parents but to everyone, taught and protected by the collective. 2 weeks after her arrival, White Dove Woman declared Sarah well enough to walk beyond the lodge. The old woman led her outside, and Sarah stood blinking in the bright morning sunlight, overwhelmed by the beauty of her surroundings. The village nestled in a valley between rolling hills, protected from harsh winds but open to the sky. A creek ran nearby, its water clear and cold. Cottonwood trees provided shade, their leaves rustling in the breeze. The plains stretched endlessly in all directions, grass rippling like waves on an ocean of gold and green. 2 hawks approached from where he had been working with several young men, teaching them to craft arrows. He dismissed his students with a gesture and came to stand before Sarah. White Dove Woman says you heal well. Your body grows strong again. Thanks to her care, Sarah replied. She had learned a few words of Lakota, though her tongue stumbled over the unfamiliar sounds. And your protection. You are ready to begin the next healing, 2 hawks said. It was not a question but a statement. The body mends faster than the spirit. Your fear still rules you. I see it in your eyes, in the way you hold yourself, in how you startle at every sound. Sarah wanted to deny it, to claim she was fine, but the words died unspoken. He was right. The terror lived in her bones now, had become part of her. I do not know how to stop being afraid, she admitted, the confession scraping her throat. You learn by doing, 2 hawks said simply. Come. He led her to where several horses grazed in a rope corral. They were beautiful animals, well-muscled and glossy-coated, clearly valued and well cared for. 2 hawks approached a gray mare, speaking softly in Lakota, his hand extended. The horse nickered and came to him, pressing her nose into his palm. This is Storm Dancer, he said. She is gentle but strong. She will teach you what I cannot. Teach me what? Sarah asked, confused. 2 hawks smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. That you have power. That you can control something larger and stronger than yourself. That fear is not a chain unless you allow it to be. He gestured to the mare. Touch her. Sarah reached out with a trembling hand, expecting the horse to shy away. But Storm Dancer stood calmly, her dark eyes regarding Sarah with what looked almost like patience. Sarah's fingers connected with the warm, solid reality of the horse's neck, feeling the life and strength beneath the smooth hide. Something shifted inside her chest. For the first time since fleeing into the night, Sarah felt a spark of something other than fear. It was small and fragile, barely more than an ember, but it was there. Hope. Summer deepened into autumn, and Sarah's transformation continued day by day. She rode Storm Dancer across the plains, at first clinging desperately to the mare's menere, then gradually learning to move with the horse's rhythm, to trust the animal and herself. She learned to work leather alongside the other women, her hands blistering and then callousing as she scraped hides under White Dove Woman's patient instruction. She helped gather wild turnips and berries, learning which plants were food and which were medicine. The other women in the village had been wary at first, uncertain what to make of this white woman who lived among them under their chief's protection. But Sarah proved her willingness to work, to learn, to contribute rather than simply take. Slowly, acceptance came. Not friendship yet, but a grudging respect. One woman, Laughing Water, even began teaching Sarah proper Lakota, amused by her stumbling attempts at pronunciation. 2 hawks remained a constant presence, though always at a careful distance. He taught her to track animals across the plains, pointing out signs that were invisible to her untrained eyes, the bent grass blade, the partial print in soft earth, the scat that told what creature had passed and when. He showed her how to read the sky for coming weather, how to find north by the stars, how to survive in this vast landscape that had once seemed so hostile and alien. They talked during these lessons, conversations that ranged from practical matters to deeper questions. Sarah learned that 2 hawks had led his band since his father's death 4 years earlier, that he carried the weight of protecting his people in an increasingly dangerous world. White settlers pushed ever westward, the army established more forts, treaties were made and broken with casual cruelty. 2 hawks walked a careful line, keeping his people safe while maintaining their way of life, choosing his battles with strategic wisdom. Your people see us as obstacles to be removed, he said one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire and gold. They do not understand that this land is not empty. It has always been our home. The buffalo, the grass, the water, we are part of it all, and it is part of us. Not all white people think that way, Sarah said quietly, though she knew her words were inadequate. She had seen enough of frontier life to know the prevailing attitudes, the casual dehumanization of native peoples, the belief that civilization must triumph over savagery by any means necessary. Two Hawks glanced at her, his expression unreadable. No. Not all. You are proof of that. You came to us with nothing but fear and pain, and you have chosen to learn our ways rather than judge them. You see us as people, not as obstacles or threats. This is rare among your kind. The words carried weight that made Sarah's chest tighten. Somewhere along the way, this place had stopped being refuge and started becoming home. These people had stopped being strangers and started becoming family. And Two Hawks had stopped being simply her protector and started becoming something else entirely, something she was afraid to name even in her own thoughts. The first snow came in late October, dusting the plains with white that melted by afternoon but promised deeper cold to come. Sarah was returning from checking snares she had learned to set, 3 rabbits hanging from her belt, when she heard horses approaching at speed. Not the measured pace of hunters returning but the urgent rhythm of danger. She ran toward the village, her heart hammering, her mind immediately conjuring images of Thomas somehow finding her despite all these months. But the riders who appeared were not her husband. They were young men from the village, scouts who had been ranging the territory. They went straight to Two Hawks' lodge, and within moments, the chief emerged. Sarah joined the gathering crowd, pushing close enough to hear. The scouts spoke rapidly in Lakota, gesturing toward the south. She caught a few words: soldiers, many, coming fast. Two Hawks listened without interruption, his face grave. When the scouts finished, he turned to address the assembled village. Laughing Water translated quietly for Sarah. Army patrol. 20 soldiers, maybe more. They ride this way. They have asked questions at other camps about a white woman. Show a drawing. The description matches you. Sarah's blood turned to ice in her veins. Thomas had not given up. He had convinced the army to help search for his missing wife, probably spinning some tale about her being taken by hostile natives. And now these soldiers came, bringing violence and threat to the people who had given her shelter and safety. I have to leave, Sarah said, grabbing Laughing Water's arm. I have to go now, lead them away. I will not let anyone here be hurt because of me. But Two Hawks had heard her. He turned, his dark eyes finding hers across the crowd. No, he said in English, his voice carrying absolute authority. You do not run. Not anymore. He strode toward her, the crowd parting before him. When he reached Sarah, he took her hands in his, the gesture shocking in its intimacy before the entire village. I made a promise to my wife. I do not break my promises. You are under my protection, and that means something. If the soldiers come for you, they come through me first. They will kill you, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. They will say you kidnapped me, and they will use it as excuse to destroy the whole village. I cannot let that happen. Two Hawks smiled, fierce and proud. Then we show them the truth. We show them that you chose to stay, that you are here of your own will. And if they do not accept this truth, then we make them understand that some things are worth fighting for. He raised his voice so the entire village could hear. Prepare yourselves. The soldiers come, but they will find us ready. The soldiers arrived at midday, their blue uniforms stark against the autumn landscape. They came in formation, rifles ready, led by a captain whose face was weathered by sun and prejudice in equal measure. Two Hawks met them at the village edge, flanked by his warriors but with weapons lowered. It was a delicate moment, balanced on the edge of violence. Sarah stood behind Two Hawks, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone must hear it. She recognized the man riding beside the captain, Thomas Mitchell, her husband, his face twisted with barely contained rage and what he would claim was righteous concern. His eyes found hers across the distance, and the look in them made her blood run cold. This was not a man seeking his lost wife but a man hunting escaped property. The captain spoke first, his voice carrying military authority. I am Captain William Hayes of the United States Army. We seek a white woman, Sarah Mitchell, who disappeared from Fort Benson 5 months ago. We have reason to believe she is being held here against her will. Two Hawks stood silent for a long moment, his presence radiating calm strength. When he spoke, his English was clear and deliberate, each word chosen with care. I am Two Hawks, chief of the Hunkpapa Lakota. The woman you seek is here. She is not held against her will. She came to us seeking protection, and we have given it freely." "That's a damn lie," Thomas shouted, spurring his horse forward. "She's my wife. You savages kidnapped her and filled her head with lies. Sarah, tell them. Tell them you want to come home." The word home hit Sarah like a physical blow. Home. The cabin where she had been beaten, starved, terrorized. The place where her screams were ignored by neighbors who believed a man's authority over his wife was absolute. The life where she had learned to make herself small and quiet and invisible, hoping that might save her from his fists. She stepped forward, moving to stand beside Two Hawks rather than behind him. The gesture was significant, and she saw understanding dawn on the captain's face. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "I was not kidnapped. I ran. I ran because my husband was going to kill me." "Lies!" Thomas roared. "Captain, you cannot believe this. She is clearly confused, turned against her own kind by these heathens. She needs to come home where she belongs, where I can care for her properly." The captain studied Sarah carefully, taking in her doeskin dress, her tanned face, her confident stance. "Mrs. Mitchell, your husband has been very concerned. He claims you disappeared without warning, that he has been searching desperately for months." "He was drunk," Sarah said, each word like a knife cutting through old lies. "He came home drunk and violent, as he did most nights. But that night, I saw him reach for his rifle. I saw murder in his eyes. So I ran. I ran into the wilderness with nothing but my life, and I would have died out there if not for Two Hawks and his people." She turned to face Thomas directly, forcing herself to meet his eyes without flinching. "You want to know what I suffered? Look at my body. These scars did not come from native hands but from Christian ones. From the hands of the man who swore before God to honor and cherish me. You nearly killed me a dozen times over, Thomas Mitchell. You do not get to play the concerned husband now." Thomas's face turned purple with rage. "How dare you speak to me this way? Captain, are you going to allow a white woman to defend these savages over her own husband? She clearly is not in her right mind." But Captain Hayes raised a hand, silencing Thomas. The captain's eyes had not left Sarah, and she saw something shifting in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. Or memory. "I have been on the frontier for 15 years, he said quietly. "I have seen many things. I have seen what some men do to their wives when there is no law to stop them, when the wilderness makes monsters of those with darkness already in their hearts." He turned to Two Hawks. "Chief, you have broken no law that I can see. Mrs. Mitchell appears to be here of her own free will. She is an adult woman capable of making her own choices." "This is outrageous," Thomas shouted. "She is my wife. My property by law. You cannot simply leave her here with these animals." The word property hung in the air like poison. Sarah saw several of the soldiers shift uncomfortably. Captain Hayes's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Mitchell is a human being, not property. If she chooses to remain here, that is her right. The law may say she is your wife, but the law also says she deserves protection from harm. From the look of things, she has found that protection here." "I will not leave without her," Thomas snarled, his hand dropping to his gun. "If you will not enforce the law, then I will take what is mine by force." The world seemed to slow. Sarah saw Thomas draw his revolver, saw murder finally crossing the line from intention to action. But Two Hawks was faster. He moved like flowing water, smooth and inevitable, putting himself between Sarah and the gun. His own weapon appeared in his hand, a knife, not a gun, because this was his land and he would not break the peace first. "You will not touch her," Two Hawks said, his voice carrying absolute finality. "Not today. Not ever. She is under my protection, and I do not break my promises." For a long moment, violence trembled in the balance. Then Captain Hayes spoke again, his voice like iron. "Mr. Mitchell, lower your weapon. That is an order. If you fire that gun, I will have you arrested for attempted murder and endangering a military operation." "But she is my wife." Thomas screamed, but his gun hand wavered. "She was your wife," Sarah said quietly. "But I choose to consider that marriage ended. Ended the night you tried to kill me. Ended the moment I ran into the darkness and these people showed me more kindness in a single night than you showed in 5 years." She stepped closer to Two Hawks, not quite touching but close enough that her meaning was clear. "I choose to stay here. With people who see me as human. With a man who kept his promise to protect me, even when it brought soldiers to his doorstep. I choose this life over the death you had planned for me." Thomas's face worked through a dozen emotions: rage, disbelief, hatred. But he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Finally, he holstered his gun. "You will regret this," he hissed at Sarah. "You will regret turning your back on your own kind, on civilization, on God himself." "Perhaps," Sarah replied. "But I will be alive to regret it. And that is enough." Captain Hayes gathered his reins. "We are leaving. Mr. Mitchell, you are welcome to remain with us at the fort, but this matter is closed. Mrs. Mitchell has made her choice clear." He nodded respectfully to Two Hawks. "Chief, I thank you for your cooperation. We will note in our report that the woman was found unharmed and chose to remain of her own free will." As the soldiers rode away, Thomas turned back one last time. His eyes promised that this was not over, that he would find a way to make her suffer for this humiliation. But Sarah stood firm, Two Hawks at her side, the entire village at her back. She was not the broken, terrified woman who had fled into the night 5 months ago. She had been forged in suffering and reborn in compassion. When the soldiers disappeared over the horizon, Two Hawks turned to Sarah. "You are certain of your choice? Life here will not be easy. Winter comes hard, and the world changes around us. My people face an uncertain future." Sarah smiled, feeling the expression light something inside her that had been dark for so long. "I am certain. For the first time in my life, I am choosing my own path. And I choose to walk it with people who see suffering and respond with kindness. Who value strength but do not mistake cruelty for power." She met his eyes directly. "I choose to walk it with you, if you will have me." Two Hawks' smile was like sunrise breaking across the plains, warm and full of promise. "Then you are home, Sarah who walks with Storm Dancer. You are home, and you are free, and no one will take that from you again." The village erupted in celebration behind them, but Sarah heard only her own heart, beating strong and steady and alive. She had escaped a brutal marriage, had been given protection by a chief who refused to let her suffer again. And in doing so, she had found something she never expected to find in the vast Montana wilderness: she had found herself. The future remained uncertain, full of challenges and dangers that would test everything she had learned. But Sarah stood ready to face whatever came next, no longer as property or victim, but as a woman who had chosen her own destiny. The night she ran into darkness had been the end of one life. This moment, standing beside Two Hawks with the whole village celebrating around them, was the beginning of another. And this time, she would write her own story.